Hi everybody, I'm joined by Stephen Chamberlain and Susan Coles. We are here to have a conversation about the importance of artist educators ahead of the next Native Creatives programme. Before I talk a bit about Native Creatives, I'd just like to ask my friends and colleagues in the room to introduce themselves. So Stephen, would you like to do that?
Hi there, I'm Stephen Chamberlain. I'm Chief Executive of the Active Learning Trust. We have 21, shortly to be 22 schools across Suffolk and Cambridgeshire. The reason I'm interested in this conversation and the work that you're all doing around the arts is my background in education, always been in the arts. I'm a classically trained musician, but was a head of music, head of performing arts for many years, and still try and keep my hand in still being a reasonably proficient musician, but really passionate about arts education and the importance it has in changing lives and transforming lives for children and young people.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us. And Susan Coles.
Well, it's lovely to be here. I've got a long list of job titles, so I'm not going to read them out. I'll just tell you that basically I'm an independent consultant advisor and I work in the northeast of England, but I work across here. And I also work internationally. And what's really interesting is that if I do have my job list in front of me, it will always start with the word artist, because that's where I started out in school and the path I've followed throughout my whole life. So it's at the centre of everything that I do, the visual arts. And I am an activist and a champion for it, and I campaign for it. And I will do that until my dying day, because as Stephen said, it is the right of every young person to have access to arts education.
Thank you, and thank you both so much for joining us today. I'm Jen Langeskov. I'm the Education Programme Manager at Festival Bridge in the east of England. I'm an artist and I'm an artist educator, and I come from a career in art and design teaching in schools in London and in Norwich. I established Native Creatives in October as a response to the pandemic. I wanted a way to support creative arts teachers with their personal practice. It started off being about their mental health and well-being, but it quickly became apparent that actually for creative arts teachers to engage with arts and culture and to develop their own practice was a really important part of their personal life, but also to have an impact on their professional life as well. We had our very first full Native Creatives event in March with some really fantastic speakers, and the feedback was amazing. We felt that the teachers felt very supported and excited and wanted to have a conversation about how they could develop their own practice as artists. And it's not visual art, it's music, drama, creative writing, theatre, whatever their passion or their interests are. And it's not just for secondary, it's for primary arts leads as well. So we are welcoming everybody into the room for the conversation for Native Creatives. Our next programme is in June, and we have got a fantastic lineup of speakers, including Andrea Zafaruku, who is the Global Teacher Award winner for 2018. We have got Paul Carney, who is a art consultant and an artist. We've got Lewis Buxton, who is a poet, amongst loads of others. So please do check out Festival Bridge website and have a look at signing up for the event in the middle of June. But we're here today to talk about why it's so important for artist educators to continue their practice or engage with their practice or engage with arts and culture. And we want to try and understand the benefits for themselves and for their teaching. So I want to start with asking both of you about what we know about teachers' creative practice. What are creative teachers doing at the moment? Stephen, can you start?
Yeah, I think the challenge for me, I was just doing some work with Apple, and I was just reading through the kind of skills that they were showing me, the skills required in demand for 2022, and I've just pulled some of them up. So creativity, originality and initiative, leadership and social influence, emotional intelligence, critical thinking and analysis, reasoning, problem solving and creation, complex problem solving. Now that's the arts in a nutshell. Yeah. We do all of those things, and actually it's getting teachers to understand how an arts process isn't just about the subject, whether it's music or drama or whatever. It's actually about a process that benefits them in all subject areas. And so for me, getting kind of native creatives to show not just arts teachers, but all teachers that process is actually something that is not only about children enjoying and benefiting from the arts, but it's actually about the skills that are in demand in the sector for 2022 onwards. And I think, if Apple, who are usually seen as technology, are saying, actually, these are the things that we need in the sector, my response as the CEO is great, because actually the arts can do all that for you. I'm not saying other subjects can't, but the arts especially encourage those skills, especially those kind of responses around emotional intelligence, creativity, critical thinking. As artists, we're used to that. That's our bread and butter around those kind of things. So I think that anything that encourages teachers in the sector to see themselves not as teachers of necessarily French, German, English, maths, but actually also teachers of the arts in its broadest sense, the liberal arts, is absolutely key to driving this forward.
And as a senior leader of many schools in your trust, do you feel that the members of your senior leadership team are on board and all have the same view and outlook that you do? And do you think this is something that is general? Because my feeling is that you get some senior leaders who are very supportive of the arts and others who are not interested in it at all.
No, I think I am very fortunate in that it didn't take much persuading to tip my executive and senior leaders into this arena. Some of them are very proficient artists, even though they're kind of directors of education or whatever, they're musicians. So they've been through that process themselves. And just as I credit, the reason, when I do my kind of speeches and spiel, why am I doing my job today? It's because of music. That's what got me to do this. And at music and education means that I have the privilege of doing this job. But the even bigger privilege of encouraging others to actually engage in this way with that process. So my team are pretty well sold on it, and actually my trustees equally are very passionate about those opportunities. And my view is that my job as a CEO is to see what benefits we can bring to our schools that a single school on their own could not do. It's the value added of being in a family of schools where the arts can really flourish. So at the moment, we're looking at how we have our own arts council for students, because actually they have the arts ambassadors in their schools. But as the CEO, I want to know what we can do as a trust on a much larger scale to support them to develop their arts provision. As you know, some of them are Arts Mark Platinum, and there's that drive in the trust for all of our schools to A, do Arts Mark, but B, to kind of engage at a higher level with doing that alongside all the other work they do.
And Susan, what's your feeling with the teachers, the individual teachers that you work with, about their identity as artist educators? How do you feel the conversation's going with them?
Yeah, that's a really interesting one, because obviously I work in all phases and sectors, and you will find primary schools that the majority of primary teachers who end up being the subject lead don't actually have the background in arts, so can find themselves incredibly frustrated and lacking in the knowledge that they need to teach the subject. But when you look at secondary, where people have gone through loving doing art themselves at school, usually onto foundation courses, degree courses, and at some point PGCEs, they are at the heart of them practicing artists, but they're quite frustrated because within the education system, which, as you know, since 2010 has become quite politicized, the subject has lost its identity in some schools. I mean, to hear Stephen talk like that is just wonderful for me to hear that from a school leader, but I also hear the opposite. And these individuals are so busy sometimes fighting for their subject in their work environment that they drain all their own passion and energy for making art themselves. So we have developed a number of initiatives, Sketchbook Circle, which you know about, Jen, because Georgia and Eleanor spoke at the last Native Creatives. We have quite strong networks in East Anglia and in the northeast of England, where people get together and they have creative days together. They just meet online and talk about work and life. And you try to say to people, you do not have to be exhibiting in a West End gallery or playing an instrument in a big orchestra. If you're drawing on the back of an envelope or tapping your fingers for a drum beat, you are practicing your art. And one of the problems in life not just education, is we measure everything and create almost a hierarchical structure. You just do it. It's central to the history of humans and to what we are, because we were doing arts before we had language.
Yeah, that's a good point. Really good point.
Yes.
From what you're saying, and from my personal experience, there is a huge frustration, isn't there, from teachers who have a huge amount of responsibility and a lot on their plate and a lot of pressure in their roles, but also a huge passion for what they're doing, for the children that they're teaching, the children and young people they are involved with. But there is also a need for them as creative practitioners or having an interest in arts and culture to continue this practice or continue this engagement. But it's finding the time and the space. And Susan, you very rightly spoke about this in the first Native Creatives event, where people don't carve out that time. They need to find and look for a space and a time to do that. Is that possible? Is that something that people can really do when they are faced with the pressure of being a teacher, family life, a pandemic, all the other things that come with that?
Well, you can't make time. You can't add an extra hour onto a day, but you can find it. The thing is to be quite self-disciplined. It could just be a chair in the corner of a room. It could be a seat in your back garden where you're sitting and thinking and listening to music or drawing or whatever. I think you just start small and you just feel that great sort of sense of self-esteem from doing something small. You don't measure it. You don't compare yourself to other people. You just get up after doing something and you just feel good, and then you'll do it another time and another time and another time. But you have to start somewhere, and you have to be a little bit selfish to do that. There's nothing wrong with that. You only got one life, you might as well enjoy it.
And it's part of your own well-being, isn't it?
Yes.
I have to go and find things to do that kind of give me pleasure in the arts, whether it's twanging a ukulele, picking up the guitar, playing the piano, playing my cello, whatever it is. God help my children singing, something that invigorates me, and sometimes it's deliberate, sometimes it's when I just find 5 minutes before something to go and just sit in the music room or go and sing in the kitchen or whatever. But it's a natural part of my life to want to look after myself through the arts in that way. And I think at the moment the biggest worry for me is you've got a government that are cutting funding for kind of teachers in further higher education. I think kind of practicing artists is going to be even more important to schools, because if there's fewer teachers who are actually coming into the profession, we're going to be looking for artists who are kind of in that space, who are teacher artists, freelance artists, teacher educators, artist educators, to fill some of the gaps of provision that may not be schools. And you touched on it earlier about kind of how tough it is anyway, but to have potentially a dearth of really good arts teachers coming through the system is a big concern for me.
Yes.
And Stephen, how do you encourage your teachers to engage with their practice or to engage with arts and culture, particularly those who in primary who aren't trained as creative artists? How do you encourage those all your teachers to engage in some form of arts and culture?
I think some of it is actually just building some confidence, because actually there's a lot of people who actually are really, really good at it, but actually never want to put themselves forward for that. So we've got a number of projects. So where we've got schools who are really at the cutting edge of the arts, like at Sidegate and Jane, we work with her across the trust over the next year to make sure that teachers can access within the trust high quality education and support in the arts, whatever they may be, to actually identify where we've got confident practitioners in different schools and bring them together in a kind of virtual and real online communities. I've employed for a sabbatical a West End musician for a year, paid for by the trust, who will be going around and working and building confidence with primary school teachers in just singing. Use your voice. We're going to use some Kodai method, so actually they can learn a bit about pitching from Eastern Europe with early years. But actually that's come from talking to head teachers about what is it you would like to see in your school to help arts flourish. And that's what it's about, is how do we create a culture in our schools where doing doing the arts is normal. It's an entitlement. It's part of your life. And for us, that's creating those enrichment opportunities that sometimes exist in the curriculum, sometimes don't. Map that and consciously do it rather than just actually hope that it happens because we happen to have good people. It can't be left to chance. It's got to be a strategy.
Definitely. And one of the things that we have been doing at Festival Bridge with native creatives is, and I know Susan is very much doing this with a lot of people that she works with, is creating these networks. So teacher networks of the creative arts where teachers can come together and talk about the challenges and successes. Challenges and successes of their practice, of their personal and professional life. Is this something that that both of you continue to encourage with the people that you're working with?
I think it's essential. I think you just wallow in self-pity when you're having a bad time if it's only you that you're doing it with. And I think that the positivity, I mean, there's a book I read, God, it'd be about 15 years ago, called The Wisdom of Crowds. It's written by a guy called James Saravecci, and he's actually nothing to do with the arts. He's a kind of business person, journalist. And it is about how collectively people are better at solving issues and problems. But if you go back to art college in particular, the big event of every season would be the group crit, where you sit around, you talk about art and you exchange views and you can agree and disagree. I think that's really important. People do it in the classroom as well. So, we need as adults to have that space and that opportunity. And you just make friends with lots of people. You make links and friends, you bring people together, you connect people, you collaborate and you create.
Yeah, really. And I think, sorry.
Our conference theme last year was called The Power of Us, which is based on a book by a guy called David Price that I worked with in San Diego. And we looked at the schools in San Diego who are really focused on the creative process and the arts in schools called High Tech High, where children will take 2 disciplines and actually work for a term, half a term, on a product at the end of that. But what's really important is not the product so much, but the process that the children do and the enrichment of meeting the challenges. And what's great is watching them actually what they call projects tune, where that critical process where somebody will talk about their project, turn away while others talk about it and give feedback, etc. And that whole process of creativity. But it is that networking that is so important, because the power of us to kind of create those opportunities for young people is always going to be more than individuals working on their own. And some of the most enriching experience I've had as an artist and musician is working with creative writers, working with dancers, working with other people in a creative way that would never have worked for me just as a musician. Being able to open my eyes to what's possible in the arts by working with different practitioners is probably the greatest inspiration I think I've had in my kind of time as an artist and as a teacher.
So just to kind of, to tie this all together, what advice would you give to our artist educators or teachers of the creative arts or primary arts leads if they want to become part of the Native Creatives conversation, if they want to continue to engage with arts and culture? What advice might you both offer them?
When the internet first started and we had kind of collective groups, Facebook or whatever, we used to call people who didn't engage but were always there as lurkers. And it sounds weird. I think they should all come in and lurk, right? Because people feel intimidated sometimes, let them switch their cameras off or whatever on a Zoom and just let them lurk and listen. And then they will build up their knowledge and their confidence and want to go further into that culture. And you give them the opportunity with things like the Jam board that we did, Jen, just to anonymously put up a comment, because it's certainly with our primary colleagues, they are intimidated at being in a space with what they consider to be specialists. And we have to break that down, and we have to create more links between primary and secondary specialisms.
Absolutely. I totally with that. And I think actually it is that, how do we build that notion that everybody is an artist? Everybody's a creator. Sense, you don't have to have had specialist training, you don't have to have specialist skills. Some of the best musicians I've ever worked with have never been anywhere near a conservatoire or anywhere else, self-taught, because they have a passion for whatever it is that lit that flame. And actually everybody's got something to bring to that creative process, whatever it is. But, you know, go in and lurk, listen, learn and network. And as your confidence builds, that's when you start to make those contributions and people go, wow, that's an amazing piece of thinking. I think we can do something with that. And that's where that confidence comes from. And that's the arts. That's why we do what we do.
Yeah, that's a great line to finish on. That's a line that Susan often uses, isn't it? Why we do what we do.
Why we do what we do, yeah.
Well, thank you both so much for talking with me today, and I hope that you have inspired lots of our creative art teachers who will happen to stumble across this little conversation. I hope that you are able to attend some of the Native Creatives events in June, from June the 15th, 16th and 17th, from 4:30 till 6:30. And I hope anybody that's watching will be able to sign in and get in touch with us if you need any more support with developing your personal practice. So thanks very much, everyone. Thanks for listening. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.